We are witnessing Western opportunism in its truest form. As long as free trade worked for all of you, you said free trade, globalization. Now that Asian countries, now that the global South is catching up, you say this is not fair, there are too many tariffs and so on. Is this what it's all about?
Well, I think it's actually China's at a trade war with us, not us with China. So
thanks for the invitation as a European, but shale gas is not very cheap, so certainly not from the US.
Carla Sands, the first Trump administration also triggered a trade war with China, and that shaved billions from the global economy, and the likes of Bloomberg and economists declared it a failure. What makes you so confident that this time it'll be different?
Well, I think it's actually China's at a trade war with us, not us with China. So, you know, China's decoupling. China has their 100-year marathon that ends in 2049. And China wrote their paper, Made in China 2025. Well, here we are in 2025, and they've pretty much fulfilled most of their goals of the technology, the high-level manufacturing, the internal consumption, and then the export to the rest of the world. But I look at what China's threatened against the West and the U.S. specifically, like the pharmaceutical precursors that they provide to most of the world, like although India is doing some of those, like the rare earth minerals that they mostly control around the world, which we all need for our cell phones and our defense equipment. And then I look at the energy policy of most of our allies, but especially Europe, rich countries in the EU, how they're in the net zero, I would call it a religion of climate change that is an anti-human deindustrialization agenda. And I hope that Europe will wake up and understand that the green energy that they're promoting actually enriches China and hands them the control of their economy and the home heating and all the uses that they need energy for, transportation, and that they will embrace the basic bedrock of energy, which is oil and gas, which is coal, clean coal, nuclear, and not be afraid of nuclear, which is completely green. And I hope that Europe will pivot and work with Trump to increase their economies and get reliable, cheap energy available to all of their citizens and their industrial base so that the deindustrialization happening among the engine of Europe will end and we will share a better future together. That's what I hope that you will work with Trump.
Alicia.
Thanks for the invitation as a European, but shale gas is not very cheap, so certainly not from the US. But let me go back to what Trump really wants. I'm sure you know better than me, but if I hear correctly, Trump wants reindustrialization. And that's fine. But the question I have is, can the US reshore everything it needs? I hope the answer is no. I hope, because, you know, if it were yes, I don't think American consumers would be happy about what it means to reshore everything back to the US. So the question is, let's call it supplementary supply chains, yeah? Supplementary. We don't need to really, you know, make China disappear, I hope. Yeah, it's there. And, you know, there's a lot of countries trading with China. So imagine we want to create a supplementary supply chain, just in case supply chain. Just in case something happens and we can't trade with China. Just in case China retaliates. Just in case we create a supplementary supply chain.
China does retaliate.
There's no just in case about this.
Okay. I've been here with you.
China boycotted $20 billion worth of Australian exports despite a free trade deal that I negotiated with China because it wanted to punish us for the temerity of calling for a full, transparent international investigation into the virus. So
they did the same thing to Norway.
China tried to corner the rare earths market, and then Japan, to its great credit, helped to keep the one Australian competitor to China in rare earths. Japan helped to keep that going a decade ago after China had banned Japan from getting any rare earths.
Tony, so I've been here, same panel with you 2 years ago, and I was making those arguments. So you don't need to convince me. I agree. But that's actually not the point now. The point is that we need a supplementary supply chain, that we're heavily dependent on China, and that the way to do it is not to fight each other as we are doing now. This is the point.
We're not fighting with anybody.
Let me let me get in Jane Hall-Lute here. I'm no fan of China, but let me ask you this. Would it be fair to say that we are witnessing Western opportunism in its truest form? As long as free trade worked for all of you, you said free trade globalization. Now that Asian countries, now that the global South is catching up, you say this is not fair, there are too many tariffs and so on. Is this what it's all about?
Okay, and I thought I was just going to alienate everybody on this panel, but I may alienate everyone in this room. A, there's no such thing as clean coal. B, I'm still reacting. I guess I'm trying to process Elisa's comment that, the rest of the world, wishes it had USA's problems. The United States wishes the rest of the world would share its burdens that it's been carrying for the past decades. And so the point is, I think, is this just us awakening to the fact that people are catching up, that global economies, powerful economies, important economies, vital economies like the economy of India are making the kind of progress that they had? Do you think we resent that? That was the whole point. It was the whole point. The United States wants capable partners around the world, not client states, okay, not dependencies. We want capable partners. And that includes partners in the global South. And so, no, I don't just think this is all about, keeping people down. This is really about lifting people up. Look, the United States has an interest in 4 things at this moment in its history. It has an interest in a safe and secure homeland. We all do, wherever we live. It has an interest in a dynamic economic engine that can generate new wealth. That's a high bar. By the way, we are doing better than anybody else. We're doing pretty well, but we know we could be doing so much better, and there are parts of our economy that are not. The third thing we need are strong friends and allies who are willing to be capable partners to the United States. And the fourth thing we need is predictable relations with others.
Who is an ally of the U.S. today?
It's a technical term. There are a lot, and there are many in this room. And so you may not like what the United States is doing right now. Does that mean you're not our allies? That's not a question for us.
No. If the U.S. is going to be imposing tariffs on everyone, if you're going to question what NATO is doing and whether NATO should be paying its bills, there are conversations that leaders have in closed rooms, and then there are conversations which also sound like threats. So I want to understand, who is a U.S. ally in this day and age?
So, I think I answered the question. And if you're asking about NATO, it was my husband who was the ambassador to NATO. So you've got the wrong Lute.
Okay, let me ask you this, Tony Abbott. Where does this leave multilateral organizations like, for instance, the World Trade Organization? What does the WTO do now? Now that countries are imposing tariffs and then some other countries are going to the WTO complaining about those tariffs, do they have any relevance, or are they going to fade into oblivion?
Well, there's no doubt that considered in isolation, free trade adds to wealth. But that's not all it does. It changes the pecking order, and it can cause a whole lot of difficult and painful adjustments for different sections of different countries. And this is where I think we've got to appreciate that maximising wealth is not the only objective. It's a very important objective, but it's not the only objective. And while personally I don't particularly like it when the American president talks about turning Canada into the 51st state and taking back Greenland, I can see what he's trying to do here. He is trying to let the rest of the world know that America has been paying a high price and a heavy burden to be the world's policeman, and it wants other countries to step up. And frankly, other countries should step up. I mean, India, for instance, should be a leader of the free world. It really should be. I mean, the great thing about India is that for 7 decades, often under enormous difficulties, India has preserved the rule of law and democracy, an absolutely admirable achievement. So why shouldn't India be, with the United States, a leader of the free world, as opposed to getting in with bad company at BRICS? I mean, why should India not step up and be a leading democracy as opposed to a junior partner to Russia and China?
India is a leading democracy, and India is a member of the BRICS.
Of course it is, but India could do so much more. For instance, I heard a suggestion at one of the sessions this morning that India might provide peacekeeping troops for Ukraine. That's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. If India is prepared to do more of that, well, I think that it would be making a wonderful contribution. It would be doing the sort of thing that America has been doing for 7 decades and hasn't received, I think, suitable recognition.
India provides peacekeeping forces to a lot of countries that the Western press and the Western powers don't often talk about, and it is under the UN framework, as I'm sure you're aware, as against the Americans who, with their burden, end up entering Iraq and Afghanistan and elsewhere. But
well, Iraq. Now, I mean, you're not going to defend the Taliban, surely? I mean, the Taliban was a monstrous regime, yes. An absolutely monstrous regime.
They're back. They're worse than before.
And look, it was to America's credit that the Taliban were gone, and frankly, it's a pity that President Biden cut and ran from Kabul and let the Taliban back.
They're back with American weapons this time. But let me get in our Japanese friend here.